Early morning in arid interior of the Eastern Cape Province, South Africa, and we'll be going for a commute over a small piece of the Suurberg mountain range, which is part of the Cape Belt Mountains that runs along the southern part of South Africa. So we'll be starting from the place of residence over there and walk approximately 2.2 kilometers to point B. And in doing so, we'll be crossing a few different vegetation types, a few different plant communities, all with its own sort of ecological drivers and ecological niches. We'll start from the riparian area in the valley close to the river, move up this south-facing slope, a very rocky, steep south-facing slope, where we have a little transitional thicket slash renosterveld. Move up to the fynbos on top, the proteoid fynbos on the south-facing slope, to the grassy fynbos on the north-facing slope, and end off in some valley thicket on the other side, which slowly grades back into this riparian area. So the annual precipitation in this area is fairly low. It's about 300 to 400 millimeters per year. And so the thicket system, which is the dominant biome here, is not very productive. It's a lot of biomass, especially for an arid area, but it's not quite productive. However, the increased moisture in these riparian areas, in these areas adjacent to the rivers, means that the herbivory intensity is just a little bit higher. And we can see that with some of the defense mechanisms of most of the plants along the riparian area. By far the most dominant, the sweet thorn tree over here, the acacia, or now known as Vachellia carew. You can see heavily armed with spines, and a lot of the other species here as well, either with thorn spines or with a very cagey architecture to protect from the excessive herbivory in these areas. We can see down below as well a lot of ruderal species. With all the foot traffic that this place will see, we have a lot of annual succulents like this Mesembryanthemum here, the ice plant. It's just an example of a plant with a very cagey architecture, protecting itself from the herbivory. This is it's a Cercia, formerly known as Rus, Cercia terota. And we have a few other plants, such as the spike thorns, Gymnosporia, and Patzelicia, with these defense mechanisms. So the thicket around here itself is quite spiny. It's known for being a very spinescent vegetation type, but like I said, almost all large woody species in this riparian area will have some sort of defense mechanisms against herbivores. We have a Carissa hematocarpa over here. Carissa having Sanskrit origins, and hematocarpa referring to the blood red fruit. Similar species in the same genus. Carissa bispinosa referring to the two spines, which are also evident on this species. So the major determinants of vegetation communities here are geology, slope, so steep and gentle slopes, and aspect, whether it's north or south facing, and then some other secondary environmental determinants such as fire. So at the moment we are on a steep south facing slope where the Cape shales, the Bidford shales, meets the quartzite and sandstone. So the south facing slope will receive a little bit less sun exposure, and that means the moisture availability is just a little bit higher, and we get on the gentle slopes a very productive renosterveld system, So the rhinoceros refers to one bush that is excessively dominant in the rhinoceros, and this is Dicerothamnus. And we have an example here of rhinoceros itself. There's rhinoceros vegetation types are quite common on the shales in the Southern Cape and Western Cape towards the Eastern Cape, and similar here, although on the side of the Eastern Cape much of the shale bands in the Suurberg is occupied by thicket, but now and then you do get these patches of sort of transitional rhinoceros. On the steeper south-facing slopes where you can see some sandstone slash quartzite coming in, the geology breaks down a little bit more difficult, so the shale breakdown is a bit easier. But over here we can see a bit more grasses and a bit more trees sort of occupying the fire refuge here. Being on the south-facing slope as well, there are some little niches for shade-tolerant succulent, like this Crassula ovata over here. Apologies, Crassula orbiculata. So Crassula is an extremely diverse genus here of succulent plant in the succulent thicket. We actually have another species just to the right there, Crassula perforata. Yeah, but this flat Crassula with the sort of basal rosette you'd find in heavily shaded areas, sometimes even in forest habitats. Yeah, and the huge variety of topography, geology, slope aspect, especially on this slope, means a bit of a mishmash of different biomes coming in here, plants with different vegetation type affinities. So we have some Helichrysum here, which is part of the Naphtali tribe. This is Helichrysum rosum, common in the Fynbos and Namaquaroon communities in this area. We have an Udara with Namaquaroon affinity, Dodonia and Cassifolia, the sand olive, which is very common in the Eastern Cape on some slopes, especially towards the Baviaanskloof. We have a tall tilt-ahead aloe, the Aloe speciosa, which is iconic in the succulent thicket here, and the large tree behind it is a Loxostylus, which is one of the trees that really likes the rocky cliffs in the Fynbos, so fire tolerant to some extent, I'd assume. So just having a look at the opposite slope, you can see that's the north-facing slope, and we see on the shale band, the dark green vegetation here is succulent thicket, and that's moving to the grassy expression of quartzite fynbos on the quartzite sandstone band. You can see on the lower slopes a lot of the succulent thicket has been degraded. There's expansive degradation of this biome in the Eastern Cape, given its limited regeneration capacity. So we've started from the valley area over there through the riparian region. We've worked up the south-facing slope. We've seen rhinoceros, which is fire-driven on the gentle south-facing slope on the shales. We've seen the very cliffy quartzite patches where some shade-tolerant succulents thrive. And on the south-facing slope, on the quartzite here, we do get a taller fynbos type, so a more proteoid fynbos. The proteas are not as dense as some other proteoid fynbos examples, but we do have a very large protea, lorifolia here. So the tall proteoid fynbos is also driven by fire, this vegetation type, this community, but at longer fire intervals than, let's say, the rhinoceros or the grassy fynbos. Too frequent fires in proteoid fynbos will actually converted to a shorter fynbos type or grassland even. Just below there we see a cycad as well, Encephalatus longifolius, so the Suurberg cycad, endemic to this mountain range. And every species of this genus in South Africa is threatened in some way. Just looking at this sort of expansive pavement on the slope here, we see some plants taking opportunity in the cracks here and there, in the little potholes. We have a hemiparasitic plant here. This is a cesium. Not sure what the species would be. Member of the mistletoe family, the Abdul-lateef. And just have a look at this fig tree. It's ficus. Its roots just finding a way through the fissures in this rock. Yeah, it takes the most ungainly sprawl to get up these pavements. But we see some Loxostylus as well here grown in one of the cracks in this pavement. Some curia as well. So a succulent of the sunflower family, Asteraceae, formerly known as Senecio. You see a member of the Azoaceae as well, one of the facies. This is probably a Ruchia, I'd say, or a Lampranthus. And a little aloe as well. It's like an aloe striata. And just hidden away, very nondescript, we have an Haworthia. So the few Haworthias that are here are quite endemic and quite special species to find. I think this would be Haworthia cooperi. We also have Haworthia aristata here, which is exceptionally endemic. Member of the aloe family as well, Asphodelaceae. So from this angle we can get a better view of that rhinoceros patch. You can see this blue-green patch of vegetation on the gentle south-facing slope on the shale. Just a lovely view of the Suurberg, the rolling hills of the Suurberg at the golden hour. So we've reached the first sort of shelf on the mountains. There's just one more shelf to go up. We're in a patch of somewhat grassy fynbos, Suurberg courtside fynbos, and a lot of similarities to the lowland fynbos we get in around the PE region. So in structure as well, mostly dominated by ericoid shrubs of the legume family and the sunflower family. One of those examples here is Indigofera denudata, which we get in that lowland fynbos as well. We have some crossular ericoides too, and also have an important grass component. There's Eragrostis, for example, Eragrostis capensis. We have some Aspalathus there in the foreground. And of course a lot of other things that you don't get in the lowland fynbos, like those cycads, and like this interesting Hermania, the doll rose, Hermania esopifolia. Well, we're not going to get much higher than this today, at an elevation of about 700 meters. That's rising from about 350 to 400 meters in the valley bottom, as we see the golden sunshine against the Suurberg Mountains once more. Well, I guess it could get higher because I think that area is about, that's about 20 meters above me or so, that slope. In any case, we can see the silhouettes of cycads on the distance. Around us we have that's a protea, I think. This is a protea repens, is that? That's a leucodendron, actually. Another member of the Proteaceae. We have a Ruchia. This is probably Ruchia orientale, yes. Another member of the Azoaceae. We have some restios. So we've seen some restios, some proteoids, and we have seen some ericas as well. I don't think the ericas are flowering. Those are the three iconic genera in the fynbos biome. The Scrophulariaceae are also fairly diverse in fynbos. This is a Siligo corymbosa, I'd imagine. We have a Phylica as well. Another Abdul-lateef. The remnants of some tree there, the skeleton. It'd probably be a Loxostylus. I think there's some resprouts there. You won't be able to see because of the light, but it looks like a Loxostylus. We have a Machaerophyllum. Here's one with some flowers. Machaerophyllum, we see them on the rocky slopes here. Another fakie. So just in the distance you can see a patch of thicket there, a patch of valley thicket right on top of the mountain here, where you'd usually expect to be fire-driven biomes like the fynbos. Yeah, and I've walked through that. There's not a lot of speckboom in there. There's a lot of the your typical thicket trees like guaris and jacket plums, and a lot of the spiny shrubs as well. Looks like all bird dispersed species. So thicket would struggle to get up here. It would be sort of the soil depth factor. There's also fire, of course. We'll walk through the biome boundary between thicket and the burning biome soon on the north facing slope. Interesting that this little patch of thicket, it's not connected. So I've been to that side over there, and that's still fynbos over there. So it's an island. It's an island of valley thicket. And what I can imagine is it's a bit of a dip in the topography, a dip in the landscape, and you'd think some water accumulates there, and perhaps that's just prevents regular fire from going through there, and a few bird dispersed species, maybe of Patalicia or Carissa, just creating habitat for some of the larger trees to establish. And before you know it, you have a little patch of thicket. And of course that is a positive feedback in terms of fire, because the higher moisture content in the leaves of those thicket trees and of the few succulents that are in there will prevent further fire. Also, a lot more. There's a few browsers up here. There's quite a bit of kudu, and they spend quite a bit of time in the thicket. Some nice forage for them, and that creates a lot of foot traffic around that patch of thicket, which is almost like a natural fire break. You can't quite see from this angle, but there's a bit of a disturbed community just immediately surrounding, like a halo around that thicket patch. The thicket sort of patches you get right in the fynbos is restricted to these rocky outcrops, where it acts as a bit of a fire refuge. The thicket composition is also different, so we have species that are a little bit more fire tolerant, like Colpoon compressum, like Loxostylus, like Mistroxylon ethiopicum, even very similar to the thicket you get, the coastal thicket you get down at the southern coast, which also occurs in a mosaic of thicket and fire-driven fynbos. So we are in that halo I mentioned before of excessive foot traffic from kudus mostly, and we do get a lot of Abdul-lateef subtingens. That block of green there is almost exclusively Abdul-lateef subtingens. This is Abdul-lateef subtingens. We can see some flowering profusely over here. Very different to the other Abdul-lateef flower I saw earlier this morning. We have a few other weedy species. You see a lot more bare ground here. It's a bit sandier here as well. We have the Siligo here as well, and we also have another scroff. This is a Hebenstreetia integrifolia, very abundant in this area. And we have Ifloga glomerata as well. It's a very unusual member of the Naphtali tribe. We saw the Helichrysum earlier. This, you wouldn't say so from first glance, bit of a strange looking species. Crussula ricoides. Then we move up to this rocky outcrop, and we see I suppose a more intact fynbos system. A lot of the fynbos here has been grazed by cattle. There's actually a fairly stark fence line contrast between what constitutes the Kuzuko and Copper Moon, I guess. We can see the effect of cattle on the fynbos vegetation. It's not as distinct as the browsing of goats and sheep and thicket, which completely transformed the system. The important ecosystem drivers, which is fire and so on, is still remains in the eaten out, heavily utilized fynbos. There does seem to be encouragement of grasses, and which would suggest that the fire regime is more frequent, where a lot of your taller fynbos species would be excluded. So there's definitely some decrease in diversity, or at least a change in composition. Looking over the Kuzuko Game Reserve, you can see the Star Village in the distance there. And this is northwards. I think that's the Bushberg in the distance, Somerset East. The start of the Great Escarpment. Elevation there is about 1,100 meters or so above sea level. It's about 300 meters. Actually a bit more, it's about 500 meters higher than where we are currently. Towards the Karoo. So on one of these rocky outcrops, it looks like a fire did pass through here, and just a suggestion of the fire tolerance of some of the larger shrubs surrounded by the fire-driven fynbos. This was a loxostylus here. It still is a loxostylus. It looks like it's resprouting, with the older above ground biomass taken out by the fire perhaps, but you'd expect a lot of this dead wood to be gone then. In any case, there's a euclea as well. And we have some pelargoniums just on the other side. Pelargonium meaning the stalks, well, referring to the structure of the flower, which in some way resembles the bill of a stalk. I'm not sure how. Every member of this genus has a very fragrant scent, very nice scent. And we can see the office over there, so that's the point B. And this is the fence separating the property of Kabucha to the Kuzuko Lodge Game Reserve. And we have a tomato as well, Solanum tomentosum. You can see that fruit resembling your typical culinary tomato as well. Tomentosum referring to the furriness of the leaves. Okay, we have to get over this fence. I think it's about 2.4 meters high. I think that's the standard. Not electrified at least, but far easier to get under than over. So we follow the warthogs. I guess this would be a warthog that did this. Greeted by the cycad on the Kuzuko side. A couple of interesting ericoid shrubs, fynbos shrubs here. We have Metalasia. It's Metalasia pungent, so it's another member of the Naphtali tribe that we've seen, Helichrysum rosum and Ifloga. And then just behind it, I think it's the only other genus in the Polygalaceae, or at least the only other genus I know. This is a Muraltia. I'd imagine it to be Muraltia adipicuroides. And we can see the flowers somewhat similar to the legume flowers. Of course, it is in the same order. And we have a little special plant, another Suurberg endemic. So we saw the Suurberg cycad and Abdul-lateef longifolius, and we have another unusual looking tree. Believe it or not, member of the sunflower family, the Asteraceae, and this is Oldenburgia. Very hairy on the underside of these leaves. Just a little one here. Not sure if that's, yeah, that's resprouting there. Don't think it's been bonsai. I think it's just resprouting. And we have a couple of Erica flowers here. So this is Erica pectinifolia. Notice the coxcomb heath, and I believe coxcomb is a set of mountains fairly close to the Suurberg, similar type of habitat. You can see some of the almost spent flowers here. Erica pectinifolia. Just behind it we have Protea repens. Yeah, getting up this sort of terrain is always quite a bit easier than going down. Getting up, you can at least, it's easier to lift your body weight up rather than gently ease it down. It can be quite rocky over here, so I'll just be using this patch of very grassy fynbos. Probably ecologically acts similar to a grassland. Just a little more things to hold here and a little less larger drops. And we can see down below a nice patch of very intact valley thicket. So the succulent thicket, or the arid thicket over here, is dominated by speckboom, sometimes in excess of 90% cover of speckboom. Speckboom is still largely dominant. It's probably still the most dominant plant in the valley thicket, but to a lesser degree. The valley thicket is also a little bit taller. There's also a little bit more woody diversity, so we get a few more tree species rather than the 3 Papia, Euclea, Scotia which you get in arid thicket. And a few other species, new species, a few vines like Cadrostis. Scotia latifolia is a bit more common. You get some milkwood, Ciderosilon, and you get, well, I know you get Caputia pyramidata here, which is an interesting succulent of the sunflower family as well, which you get in these slopes of valley thicket, but not in the arid thicket below. We'll also see the sort of contact zone between thicket and grassland here, or fynbos, and we can see some speckboom propagules attempting to colonize the burning biome, but of course just being kept back by fire being unable to penetrate into the thicket, and so we have a little bit of alternative stable states, and those boundaries will be maintained, you'd imagine, until a large disturbance event occurs that breaks that threshold. So either that's a super big fire that can just burn into the thicket, or a period of no fire, a long period of no fire, where speckboom can reach maturity and start excluding fire. I think that will take quite a long time though, probably over 100 years. And with this system being more grassy since people have used the land here, you'd imagine no fires for 100 years would be not too common. I think there's also the geological divide here, don't think should be ignored. It doesn't follow it strictly, so the thicket does come up into the sandstone a little bit, but yeah, just the lower level of nutrients in the sandstone as compared to the shale. Apologies, just fell down there a little bit. But in any case, the low level of nutrients you find in the shale break down a bit easier, so a bit of deeper soil, so more space for the roots for some of the large thicket species. That's all coming into play to maintain this boundary between succulent thicket, valley thicket, and succulent / valley thicket and fynbos. We get a nice view of Hopewell from above. So Hopewell was where the office is based. It was an old farm before being taken over by Kuzuko. I think this area had about 20 or so farms. You can see the nursery to the right and the dam just to the north of that, and the rest of the Kuzuka Reserve. So still on the slope, we can see a little bit a rocky protrusion here, so a little bit less vegetation cover, so not as much fuel to burn, and we see just a couple of things taking advantage of this. So this is a Euphorbia polygona, and looks quite a bit like a cactus. It is not a cactus, no, it's sort of South Africa's equivalent to the cactus. And just in the distance we see some speckworm, so that's a little bit of thicket that's just moving up using the fire refuge here. Likely not going to escape that fire refuge though. We see another one, a little patch of thicket there. We can see some aloeferox, so that's not normally indicative of an intact thicket. They normally grow in the open areas, and we can see some stunted euclid, I think, from a distance. I think that would also be somewhat of a fire refuge, but it's not on a distinct rocky outcrop. I think it's just topographically it's just very steep, and the fire, well, the big fires don't seem to burn down there. Slowly moving into the thicket now. I've just walked adjacent to that bush clump I pointed out earlier on. So we do have some speckworm here, just on the other side now. But in any case, there's a large Crassula ovata here, similar. It's also a large succulent. I would say the habit is similar to speckworm, not as sprawling as speckworm. We have a Cercia, formerly known as Rus. I think this is Cercia palens, given the shape of the fruit, which is quite flat. We can ID Cercias quickly by the trifoliate leaves. And we have Scotia latifolia, so the Karoo bourboon, not as common as its sister, the Scotia afra, but we do get it more often in the valley thicket, and this is a little extension of valley thicket, this little bush clump. We have a nice bulb here as well. So a lot of these types of bulbs, the shade tolerant species, you don't get that much in the arid thicket too. So this is a Haimanthus, a member of the Amaryllidaceae, Haimanthus albifloss. So it has a very pretty white flower, paintbrush lily, I think it's commonly known as. And I have a Grewia as well, Grewia robusta, a very common shrub all over the place here. So that's right into the arid thicket, degraded thicket, the valley thicket. Yeah, just a look upslope, how grassy this area is. It's far grassier than the fern bush we walked on the south facing slope and right on top. This is a lot of Eragrostis curvula, I believe. I think that's Erharta over there. Would be Erharta calicina or erecta, one of the two. And there's a Digitaria as well, so it's likely Digitaria eriantha, I guess. I'm not too clued up on the grasses. But yeah, a lot more abundant here. So the system would be more productive, and you'd imagine fires to be more frequent as well, and fires of lesser intensity, which I think gives the opportunity for some of these valley thicket bush clumps to arise. We can also see on the edges of these bush clumps we get some aloes. We also get some things like Grewia and so on. So a bit of a transition, yeah, a bit of a boundary between what's burning and what's not, and have a little bit of a fringe coming with its own unique species. We begin to look into that when we get to the more expansive area of thicket, and to see what species are on that boundary between the thicket and the grassy fynbos. Yeah, so this is approaching the biome boundary between thicket and this grassy fynbos, and we can see speckworm just increasing in abundance. So speckworm propagules are just likely being continuously thrown out into this burning habitat, being wiped out by fire, or when we have that event that breaks the threshold breaking event, it can start excluding fire, and valley thicket will establish here. We can see a lot of the speckworm individuals here. There's not many large ones. They're all roughly of the same size. They're all almost sort of equally spaced apart. So you'd imagine that a fire wiped all speckworm out at the same time, and all the propagules that have since regrown into the grassy fynbos or started about the same time, and they've all of a similar cohort in a way. As I say that there is a couple of larger speckworm here, but you can see it's a tiny bit of a ridge with a bit of a rocky outcrop, so it might have been just protected from the last big fire. We can see it gets quite dense here on this little rocky outcrop. We also have a eucalypt tree and some Crassula ovata there. Well, now I can see clearer. And so speckworm having more protection from fire in that area. Interestingly enough, you don't see speckworm being, fighting into a degraded thicket, like even at these stark fence line contrasts. So, not sure what the reason would be for that. I think there definitely is a positive correlation between the density of speckworm and the amount of propagules it throws out into neighboring habitats. So if you have a super intact patch of speckworm thicket, you're just going to get more vegetative propagules and more seedlings as well into the neighboring habitat. So the more speckworm there is, the higher chance of natural regeneration. This is probably a better environment for a young speckworm seedling or young speckworm propagule to establish than some of the degraded thicket areas as well, where there is less cover. So soils get a bit hotter and less moisture retention. You'd imagine there to be some moisture retention, at least a bit better than bare soils, and soil temperatures to be protected a little bit, especially with this dense layer of grass and herbs and ericoid shrubs. As you see, a Crassula rupestris here, so similar looking to Crassula perforata. These do like growing on the sandstone, little cracks and crevices. Also distinguished from Crassula perforata by the length of the inflorescence. The floral stalk is much shorter on this species. Okay, I'm at the boundary between thicket, the valley thicket, which is a type of succulent thicket, just to clear up that term, and the burning biome, which is a grassy fynbos, which can be considered almost grassland. And there's not a huge transition. There seems to be a little bit of a natural fire break given the heightened amounts of herbivory in and around the thicket. We do have a tall sneezewood over here, Pteroxylon obliquum. Latin name translates directly to sneezewood as well. But yeah, seems to be a lot of speckworm in between. Seems to be largely speckworm. Crassula ovata as well over here. I would imagine there's just a lot of foot traffic here and just a lot of little propagules of Crassula being sprayed about. But yeah, not a unique fringe community, I don't think. Yeah, it's almost, you go straight, you get a little patch of speckworm, fringe of speckworm, and then you get straight into the valley thicket. So the speckworm as well acting as a protection from fire. So you'd expect fire not to get through here, at least at a lower intensity if it does reach the broadleaf stuff in the thicket. Have some Eragrostis obtusa there. And we can just take another look up the slope. We just walk down. And the tilt head aloes speciosa emerging from the thicket, indicating that we're almost down and we're slowly moving into the Witterberg shales. Just need to find a nice animal path. You can see how dense it is. And this is what I think it is characterized, just a dense assemblage of low trees, spinescent shrubs like this Patalicia, large stem succulents like speckworm, like Crassula ovata, mostly speckworm. No grasses really, so the shade does exclude most of the grasses we get here, and then open patches we get some grasses over. Yeah, I think it's characterized by a lot of vines as well, vines, climbers, lianas, and succulent shrubs too, like this Crassula bryanthioides. You see the nice glisten on these leaves of this Crassula. There's about 19 Crassula species, I think, in the Kazuka Reserve that I've recorded. Very speciose genus in thicket. Yeah, so just to let you know, I've been actively avoiding the really dense things just because it's so difficult to walk through. And with so much Patalicia pyracantha, aptly known as the bastard thorn, Patalicia referring to botanist, and pyracantha referring to another genus of plant, pyracantha actually also just meaning fire thorn. Yeah, in any case, so basically I've been walking in the open areas where we see a lot of the sandstone, and the thicket is not that dense. I spoke about Capuchia pyramidata, one of the species that just distinguishes between the valley thicket and the arid thicket, which are both types of succulent thicket. We have a bit of interesting looking species. Reminds me of the Dendrosenecio of East Africa. It is also formerly a senecio, I think. Yeah, Capuchia pyramidata. Bizarrely enough, this is the first Papia capensis I've seen this morning. This is the most common tree in the succulent thicket types, like this valley thicket. Well, we haven't seen it yet because I've avoided the dense thicket. I've had to walk through a patch over here. You can see it's a lot of speckworm biomass. Not super thorny. There's a Gymnosporia capitata there, which has some nasty thorns, but there are some open patches where you can avoid some of the spines. Yeah, so this is Papia capensis. I think you get them up north as well. I saw in the Kruger in the low veld there, the jacket plum. And we've come full circle. We've reached the bottom of this north-facing slope and have moved once again into the riparian area. So we started off in the riparian area, which structurally is characterized by a lot of thorn trees, so a lot of species with high spinescence, given the excessive amount of herbivory there as well. There's also the other disturbance of flooding, which I think is a lot more punctuated. So then we moved up the south-facing slope on the shells through Rhinocerveld to a transitional area where fire plays a role, topography plays a role. We have patches of thicket here and there, and then patches of like grassy fynbos. We moved to the top of the Suurberg where we had a low ericoid fynbos, dominated by ericoid species of the Asteraceae and the Fabaceae, very similar to the lowland fynbos we get around PE. We saw a few endemics, the Suurberg cycad and Cephalatus longifolius, as well as Oldenburgia. We moved down the north-facing slope, which was an exceptionally grassy fynbos, almost a grassland where fire frequency is a lot higher and there's a little bit more productivity. And then we saw the boundary between the valley thicket and the grassland, and we saw speckworm sort of propagule slowly making its way up that grassland, only to be knocked back by fire continuously. So that's about 4 or 5 distinct vegetation communities here. I think we'll have 3 biomes. So we'll have the thicket biome, the fynbos biome, and the azonal riparian biome. I think you can classify that as a biome in itself. And within the fynbos, we did see 3 distinct types. So the Rhinocerveld, which we'll lump in with fynbos for now, and the grassy fynbos, and then the taller sort of proteoid fynbos. There's a bit of transition between the ericoid fynbos to the taller proteoid fynbos. In any case, that will be all for this morning's walk.